Hello, my beautiful, wonderful children. I have a special video for you today. One that I've been asked to do a lot. But before we get into it, I want to recognize that yesterday was the 12th anniversary of Robert Jordan's passing, something I did not realize until it was brought to my attention, and I feel guilty for not addressing. I feel guilty I didn't address the passing of the man who was responsible for this channel existing, my love of fantasy, and this community we have here. So in response, I would like to finally make a video that has been requested so many times by people who are curious to read the Wheel of Time. What should you know before starting? And in this video, which will be spoiler free, we're going to cover everything from the technical details to maybe some of the lore that would probably be better to know before going in of the Wheel of Time. Now, real quickly, as a brief aside, I put out a poll on my Twitter: which fantasy series deep dive would you like to see next? My most viewed video on this channel is a lore deep dive for the Wheel of Time. And the series that won the poll, I'm very happy to say, is the Stormlight Archive. So once I am a full-time YouTuber on the 20th, I will be beginning work on the Stormlight Archive series lore deep dive. Very excited for that. But without any further ado, let's begin the video. Everything you need to know about the Wheel of Time before you begin. The Wheel of Time is the largest high fantasy series ever written by word count. There's a common misconception that Malazan Book of the Fallen is longer, but if you include New Spring, the prequel to the Wheel of Time, it edges out Malazan by a smidge. These books were released between 1990 and 2013, beginning with The Eye of the World and ending with A Memory of Light, the 14th book in the main series, but if you count the prequel, the 15th. And this brings me to answering a question I have answered many, many times, and even though I have literally made my handle on Twitter New Spring After 5, I still get asked on Twitter repeatedly, if you want to read the prequel, do it after 5. It's by no means required. I think it's a nice, even standalone fantasy story, but yes, it does canonically take place within the world, and I recommend it after book 5. And I recommend it after book 5. And I recommend it after book 5. And I recommend it after book 5.
And I recommend it after book 5.
The series was written by 2 authors because, as I previously mentioned, Robert Jordan passed 12 years ago as of yesterday. It was finished, though, by the absolutely legendary and huge currently Brandon Sanderson, who really was rocketed into superstardom within the fantasy community for doing such a widely recognized as phenomenal job of finishing the Wheel of Time series. A task that still boggles my mind to this day. I can't imagine getting that call and being like, hey, you're a fan of the Wheel of Time, right? Yeah. Want to finish it? Yeah, the series is written in third person, which I know some fantasy fans do prefer first person. I think you people are monsters. It is not medieval fantasy. There is a lot of people who miss that when reading the entire series, which I still am baffled by, but this is not medieval fantasy. It is, I guess the most accurate you could say is a Renaissance-esque setting, and that is what it should be visualized and recognized as. It is a bit tricky to nail down when in human history equivocates to the Wheel of Time because there are so many cultures who do reflect very different time periods in different ways, and there's no real equal matching, and that's deliberate because Robert Jordan, in his vision, wanted to take all kinds of cultures from across human history and geography and blend them together. And that brings me to the things you should expect from the Wheel of Time. The first and foremost in mind being the most well-realized cultures fantasy has seen. I don't think many people can argue this point. There are other fantasy series with maybe a bit more history to them, maybe a slightly deeper lore, but in terms of well-realized cultures, down to the fucking buttons on people's clothing and the colors and just makes of different clothings they wear to accents and ways of speaking, really everything. Robert Jordan knocked it out of the park. If you want to see cultures influenced from everything from medieval times to Renaissance to ancient China, Rome, they're all there. The Middle East, it really just goes across our entire world, even pulling from ancient African tribes and some of my favorite aspects of the Aiel culture. The Wheel of Time has a smorgasbord of characters for you to fall in love with. Everything from the stubborn healer to the charming gambler. Many of them do sound like they fall into tropes at their core, but it's hard to pin them down exactly because Robert Jordan really wanted to stress complex and put a focus on human elements in his characters, making them feel like well-realized people instead of caricatures. And he will take the time to give you plenty of examples of that. And using that as a smooth transition of plenty of examples, one of the very common and very fair critiques the Wheel of Time does receive is its wordiness and over-describing. Robert Jordan liked his info dumps at times, and he liked repeating some of those info dumps so that they are firmly cemented in your head. For example, his magic system is complex and beautiful and very well realized, but you're going to learn about it again and again and again and again. The same could be said about clothing and culture and several other features of the series. This is off-putting to a lot of people. I was kind of raised on this series, so I'm very used to it, and I get the criticism and how it can be off-putting. I don't think it's a humongous negative, and I think the more you actually read the series, the less you feel it, and maybe even the more you appreciate it once you really realize the culture work and world building that is being done. But if you are someone who does not like wordy, dense fantasy series, you might really struggle with this feature of the Wheel of Time. So there are criticisms that can be laid against the Wheel of Time. It's very Tolkien derivative at its beginning, but that's kind of intentional. Yes, Trollocs are like orc, but the mythology of the growing behind the Shadow's army is extraordinary. The Wheel of Time is wordy, and that can be off-putting, and I won't even fight against that being a legitimate criticism. It is. But if you can appreciate culture and world building, I think you can come to appreciate Robert Jordan's dedication to description. Though, yes, I'll admit at times it gets a bit much. Now, I'm not going to get very deep into the Wheel of Time's history and lore because I've already done a video on that I previously mentioned, and I'll link that down below as well as through a card right by my head here. But that is as well spoiler-free, and if you really want to know the setting of the story as it begins, you can go ahead and click on that video. Although there's some things I've been told some people consider spoilers, but I completely disagree on because they're not central to the plot, and their things aren't even directly stated to you in the text. It's just things you could pick up on, and so I just go ahead and show you so that you can enjoy them once you encounter them in the series, but that's a whole other conversation. But if you want to boil this video down to its core, yes, The Wheel of Time is a finished fantasy series, which I already know is a big selling point to a lot of people who have been struggling with Kingkiller Chronicles and Song of Ice and Fire. It was finished by Brandon Sanderson, who is considered one of the best fantasy authors ever, and he's just getting started. It's truly epic, it can be a bit wordy, and it is very much so paying homage to classic fantasy at the beginning, but it does definitely branch off into much more modern fantasy vibes later on in the series as it truly comes into its own. I really believe Book 4 is when the Wheel of Time becomes the Wheel of Time. If you're someone who enjoys dedication to building a world's cultures, history, and mythos, you will love the Wheel of Time. If you enjoy a lot of character work, you will enjoy that as well. The only people I can see not enjoying the Wheel of Time are those who get very upset by overly describing or repetition of describing things within the world. I very much so understand that, but I don't think it's as big an issue as a lot of people make it out to be. It is not medieval fantasy, despite what some people who maybe skim-read the series might tell you. Swords don't equal medieval. They were used all the way up until the Civil War and later. American Civil War. I know a lot of you are European. But that is what I truly believe is everything you should know, plus my lore deep dive video going into the Wheel of Time. Lower quality, quick addendum to the video here. I also want to point out, I was debating putting this in, but I really feel like I should. Avoid Google like the plague, because even like Google auto fill-in will have pretty major spoilers for the Wheel of Time. Like if you put a character name space, then you'll get spoilers. So please avoid that. Wheel of Time people on Twitter use the handle #TwitterOfTime, and if you click on that hashtag, you might also see spoilers. But if you use it and mention, hey, please keep your responses spoiler-free, people are pretty great about it being spoiler-free. So you can interact with the community. I would just avoid clicking on the hashtag. I would just use it and then say all responses and stuff related to this keep spoiler-free, and people are very respectful of that. So that's just a quick avoid spoilers warning for the Wheel of Time in general. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace! And, of course, I'd like to record a special shout-out to my latest high-tier Patreons. Danny Potter, with a very apt, most apt fantasy name, and Sister of Demons, which, oh, that's intense. I like it. All right, thank you guys so much. The Patreon has still just been exploding, which I feel the need to write more for you faster because there's so much more you now. So I can't wait to get started on that again soon. Have a good one.